For 3 decades, the name Victor Moretti echoed through the criminal underworld like a death sentence. Politicians feared him. Business tycoons secretly obeyed him. Entire mafia families collapsed after daring to challenge him. In every dark alley, private casino, and underground deal, one rule remained constant: never cross Victor Moretti. People called him the Stone King because nobody had ever seen emotion on his face. No laughter. No joy. No sadness. Just cold silence. His mansion sat on the edge of the city cliffs like a fortress. Armed guards patrolled every corner. Cameras watched every hallway. Even the servants avoided eye contact when he passed. The atmosphere inside the mansion felt frozen in time, heavy with fear and tension. Victor's mornings were always the same: black coffee, security reports, business calls, meetings with men who looked terrified even while speaking. His expensive suits were flawless, but beneath them were countless scars from wars fought long ago. Some were from bullets, others from betrayal. What nobody knew was that Victor had once been different. Long before becoming the most powerful mafia CEO in the country, he had been a young man deeply in love. Years ago, he planned to leave the criminal world forever with the woman he loved most. But enemies used that love against him. One rainy night, she was murdered in front of him. That night destroyed whatever humanity remained inside Victor. From then on, he built his empire not with passion, but with pain. He trusted nobody. Smiles disappeared from his life completely. Even celebrations inside his organization felt like funerals because their boss never reacted to anything. One evening, after a violent meeting with rival gangs, Victor returned home injured. Blood stained the sleeve of his white shirt where a knife had sliced across his hand during a confrontation. Normally, doctors handled his wounds immediately. But that night, the mansion's medical staff had not yet arrived. The servants panicked quietly. Then someone unexpected stepped forward. A young maid named Elena. She had only worked at the mansion for 2 months. Unlike the other workers, she came from a simple background and knew almost nothing about mafia politics. She was innocent, clumsy, and strangely fearless. Victor sat silently in the medical room while she nervously opened a first aid kit. His icy eyes watched her every movement. Her hands trembled slightly. Then she noticed something. The normal bandages were missing. All she could find was a small pack of colorful cartoon bandages she used for children at her previous job babysitting. For a moment, she froze. The deadliest man in the country stared at her while she held tiny bandages covered in smiling bears and stars. The guards expected her to panic. Instead, Elena quietly said, "It's all I could find." And before anyone could stop her, she gently wrapped the cute bandage around his wounded hand. Silence filled the room. The guards looked horrified. But then something impossible happened. Victor looked down at the ridiculous little bandage and laughed. Not a fake smile. Not a cold smirk. A real laugh.
Deep. Sudden. Human.
Everyone in the room froze in absolute shock. Because for the first time in 30 years, the Stone King smiled. And from that moment, nothing inside the mansion would ever remain the same. The next morning, the mansion felt strangely different. Rumors spread among the guards and servants faster than wildfire. Nobody could believe what they had witnessed the previous night. Victor Moretti had laughed.
Some even thought they imagined it.
But Elena remembered clearly. She spent the entire night terrified she would be fired or worse. After all, nobody treated Victor casually. Employees spoke to him with rehearsed politeness. Even powerful criminals lowered their eyes around him. Yet somehow, she had placed cartoon bandages on his hand like he was an ordinary person. When Elena entered the dining hall the next morning to serve coffee, the room instantly fell silent. Victor sat at the head of the massive black marble table reading documents while bodyguards stood nearby. Elena tried avoiding eye contact. Then Victor slowly raised his injured hand. The colorful bandage was still there. Several guards looked confused because he had refused replacement bandages from the medical staff. Victor glanced at Elena and calmly said, "Coffee." No anger, no threat, just one word. As days passed, Victor began noticing things about her that nobody else dared show inside the mansion. She hummed softly while cleaning. She smiled naturally. She spoke honestly instead of fearfully. One afternoon, Victor overheard her scolding a giant bodyguard for stepping on freshly cleaned floors. The entire hallway went silent. The bodyguard looked terrified, not of Elena, but of Victor's reaction. But Victor simply watched with quiet amusement. For the first time in decades, someone inside his home behaved normally around him. And strangely, he liked it. Meanwhile, Elena slowly discovered that behind Victor's terrifying reputation was a man carrying endless loneliness. She noticed he often stood alone on the balcony late at night staring into the city for hours. His meals were untouched half the time. His mansion overflowed with luxury, yet felt completely empty. One rainy evening, Elena accidentally found an old piano room while cleaning. Dust covered everything inside. But what shocked her most was a framed photograph hidden beneath a cloth. A younger Victor stood smiling beside a beautiful woman.
Smiling.
The discovery changed everything she believed about him. Later that night, she gathered courage and asked softly, "Who is she?" The room instantly became tense. Guards exchanged nervous looks. Nobody asked Victor personal questions.
Ever.
Victor remained silent for several seconds before answering quietly, "Someone I failed to protect." His voice carried pain deeper than anger. That was the first real conversation they ever shared. After that night, Victor began spending more time around Elena, without realizing it. He found excuses to remain in rooms where she worked. Meetings ended earlier. His temper became calmer. Even his organization noticed changes. Rival gangs became confused when Victor suddenly canceled brutal punishments he once delivered without hesitation. One loyal advisor finally asked him carefully, "Boss, are you feeling all right lately?" Victor answered coldly, "Mind your business." But secretly, even he didn't understand what was happening to him. Elena's kindness was breaking walls that violence never could. And for the first time in 30 years, Victor Moretti feared something more dangerous than enemies. He feared hope. Victor's organization operated like a machine built on fear. Orders were followed instantly. Mistakes were punished harshly. Loyalty mattered more than life itself. But suddenly, strange changes began happening. Meetings ended without violence. Employees stopped disappearing over minor failures. Even rival groups noticed Victor becoming less aggressive during negotiations. The underground world became suspicious. Some believed he was sick. Others believed he was planning something bigger. Nobody guessed the real reason was a maid who carried strawberry candies in her apron pocket and used cartoon bandages. Inside the mansion, Elena continued treating Victor like a human being instead of a monster. She reminded him to eat meals on time. She argued when he skipped sleep. Sometimes she even laughed at his overly serious personality. Shockingly, Victor allowed it. One night, Elena found him sitting alone in the massive library, surrounded by dim golden lights. Papers and weapons covered the table beside him. "You should rest," she said gently. Victor replied without looking up, "Rest is dangerous." Elena walked closer and placed a cup of tea beside him. "So is loneliness." Her words hit harder than bullets ever had. Victor stared silently at the steam rising from the cup. Nobody had spoken to him with such honesty in decades. At that moment, something shifted inside him forever. Meanwhile, danger was growing outside the mansion walls. Victor's enemies noticed weakness. And in the Mafia world, love is weakness. A rival crime leader named Salvatore Leone began investigating Elena after hearing rumors about Victor's unusual behavior. The moment he discovered her importance, she became a target. Victor's advisors warned him repeatedly. "She's becoming a liability. You're exposing yourself. Enemies will use her against you." But Victor ignored every warning. For the first time in his life, protecting someone mattered more than power. One evening, Elena visited the mansion garden where Victor rarely allowed anyone. The sunset painted warm orange light across the roses while fountains echoed softly nearby. Victor unexpectedly joined her there. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Elena smiled and asked, "Why do you always look like you're preparing for war?" Victor answered honestly, "Because war is all I've ever known." She looked at him carefully before saying something nobody else would dare say. "You deserve peace too." Those words shattered him more than violence ever could. Because deep down, Victor no longer believed he deserved anything good. That night, he sat alone in his office holding the old photograph of the woman he lost years ago. For the first time in decades, he wondered whether life was giving him another chance. But fate had other plans. Because across the city, Salvatore Leone prepared to strike. And the moment Elena entered Victor's world, she unknowingly stepped into the deadliest battlefield imaginable. The attack happened 3 nights later. Rain crashed against the mansion windows while thunder shook the sky. Most servants slept unaware of the danger approaching through the darkness outside. Victor sat in his office reviewing reports when alarms suddenly exploded across the estate. Gunfire erupted instantly. Guards shouted through radios. Enemy vehicles stormed the front gates. Salvatore Leone had arrived. Victor's face became ice cold again, the terrifying Mafia king returning in seconds. But this time, fear gripped him differently. Because Elena was inside the mansion. Chaos spread everywhere. Bullets shattered windows. Security lights flashed red through smoke-filled hallways. Victor moved through the mansion with deadly precision, protecting his territory like a predator defending its final weakness. Meanwhile, Elena hid in the kitchen with terrified staff members as explosions echoed nearby. Then the lights suddenly went out. Silence. Footsteps approached slowly through the darkness. One of Salvatore's men entered the room holding a weapon. The servants froze in terror. But before the attacker could move further, Victor appeared behind him like death itself. The fight lasted seconds. When it ended, Victor turned immediately toward Elena. His hands trembled slightly. Not from rage. From fear of losing her. It was the first time anyone had ever seen the great Victor Moretti afraid. Elena stared at him in shock as rainwater and blood dripped from his black suit. "You came for me," she whispered. Victor answered without hesitation. "Always." That single word changed everything between them. For the rest of the night, Victor personally stayed beside her while his men secured the estate. He refused to leave her alone, even once. And somewhere between the gunfire, the fear, and the silence afterward, both realized the truth they had been avoiding. They were in love. But love inside the Mafia world comes with consequences. The next morning, Victor made a decision that stunned his entire organization. He announced plans to step away from major criminal operations. The room exploded with outrage. "You built this empire. Enemies will destroy us. You're risking everything for Maid?" Victor listened calmly before speaking one final sentence. "For 30 years, I ruled through fear. And for 30 years, I was already dead inside." Silence consumed the room. Then he continued quietly. "She reminded me how to live." For the first time, his men saw not a Mafia king, but a man choosing love over violence. But enemies never allow powerful men to leave peacefully. Salvatore survived the attack. And now his war against Victor had become personal. The final confrontation came at dawn. Victor knew Salvatore would never stop hunting Elena. As long as the Mafia war continued, she would remain in danger forever. So Victor prepared to end everything himself. Against the wishes of his organization, he arranged one final meeting at an abandoned harbor outside the city. Fog rolled across the water, while cargo ships creaked in the distance. Armed men surrounded both sides, waiting for violence to erupt. Salvatore arrived smiling cruelly. "All this," he laughed, "because you fell in love with a maid?" Victor stood silently in a black coat, emotionless once again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not empty. Focused. Salvatore mocked him relentlessly, believing Victor had become weak. He spoke about Elena like she was nothing more than leverage. That mistake sealed his fate. Victor's response was swift and merciless. The battle exploded across the harbor in cinematic chaos, gunfire echoing through steel containers, rain mixing with smoke, enemies collapsing in the fog. But unlike previous wars, Victor wasn't fighting for power. He was fighting for a future. When the violence finally ended, Salvatore fell defeated at Victor's feet. For years, Victor would have executed him without hesitation. Instead, he lowered his weapon. "Leave the city," Victor said coldly. "If I ever see you again, there won't be mercy twice." Even his enemies looked stunned. The Stone King had changed. Days later, the criminal empire officially began dissolving under Victor's orders. Illegal operations closed. Dirty money disappeared into legitimate businesses. Trusted men were paid generously and released from service. The underworld could hardly believe it. The most feared Mafia CEO in history walked away from power willingly. And all because of one girl who treated him like a person instead of a monster. Months later, the massive mansion no longer felt cold. Laughter echoed through hallways once filled with silence. Guards relaxed. Staff smiled openly. And Victor? He smiled too. Often. One peaceful afternoon, Elena sat beside him in the garden while sunlight warmed the roses around them. Victor looked calmer than anyone had ever seen. Then Elena noticed something amusing. He still carried one unused cartoon bandage inside his wallet. "For luck," he admitted quietly. Elena burst into laughter. And moments later, so did Victor. A real, genuine laugh. Not because he forgot his pain, but because someone finally gave him a reason to heal. Sometimes, the strongest hearts are not changed by war, fear, or power. Sometimes all it takes is kindness. And for Victor Moretti, love arrived disguised as a maid holding cute little bandages.